say, you know what? You know the nice neighbor that everyone seems to love? Well, this is what he's doing to me. How can I tell someone? Well, that person you just did. And I'm going to make sure it stops. So when we make these arguments about the register and making them do the list and all of that, that's fine. I'm not saying not to do that, but I don't want us to be so focused on that we don't keep the lines of communication open to say, okay, well, why is this coach that's such a great coach can't go back to the city where he came from? Or why is it this neighbor who has no kids of his own seems to always want all the kids to come over to his house and seems to be readily have everything that they would love to have? You know, these are things that we have to
pay attention to.
Pay attention to. Yeah, thank you. You know, pay attention, listen, and just be actively involved in our children's lives. That is the thing that I like to push with parents when they always ask that question about that list. And I think that will, because if you do that, you don't have to worry about the list. Because your child's going to always tell you, hey, so-and-so was looking at me kind of weird yesterday. I don't like it. And as a parent, you're going to make sure it stops.
Yep.
Other questions?
Thank you. I have 3 questions, so those were quick answers. So, although the one that takes the longest at first. So you just mentioned 48 hours straight. I know every week may not be like that, but that is a daunting week. And so I lead with that because I really want you all to think about this and give an honest answer. You know, you have to worry about who you report to and all that kind of stuff. But what do you need when you're sitting at your computers, when you've done all one person can do? What is it that you need? Do you need funding for more people to be on your special task force? Are there opportunities for private companies to support what you do? Like, I'm sitting here thinking, like, there's tons of project managers and kids fresh out of college who know how to mine websites and do all the Gopher type research work that must be happening behind the scenes. But then I grapple with that because I realize that there's something to be said for all of the training that you all have already gone through in the positions you had prior to where you got to. So it seems to be a conflict of interest. Like, I would love to come tomorrow and go, what can I do to help? But I'm not in law enforcement and I haven't been through all of that training. So my question simply is, what do you need? Because we're before the people who can pass laws to look up funding and other things to do it quick. So I know there's going to be a session later today. I think they've dedicated 30 minutes to writing policies and so forth. But for those of us who may not be able to be there, I would just really like to know, what are you in most need of? I always assume it's resources, but I don't want to make that assumption.
In the hand that you give us, we can pass the ability to work cases at any time. However, as I've stated before, we become not necessarily a target, but our name comes up. When I say our name, I'm talking about Metro Atlanta. Our name comes up a lot. Our name comes up a lot because we do a lot. You know, and with us coming here today and speaking in public forums and things of that nature, there's the next person. We'll probably get a spinoff leaving here in case somebody has come in contact with a girl that may be in the life of human trafficking, or somebody who knows a pimp that's doing wrong. So by us working on a daily basis and getting out there and doing these things, it's making it open to the public eye, which is going to drive our numbers up anyway, because they're going to report more. So it's difficult to say what we actually need. Yeah, I could use some rest. I can do that. I'm not sure if we can provide that. I could use the manpower. I don't know how we go about doing that. You know, our department is committed, and I know that most of the Metro Atlanta departments are committed, to include GBI, FBI, even Secret Service and Homeland Security are also involved in the prosecution and eradication of human trafficking. But that's a good question, which I find anyway going to be difficult to answer, because the more we do this work, the more work is going to be brought to us.
So the only thing I would add is, I agree. I thought the sergeant gave a great answer earlier about the fact that because these folks are doing such a great job, it gets a lot of attention. I think there are some politicians / local elected officials that dislike that news, that think it adversely affects what they want their city to be known for. So I think the fear is they will either seek to actually reduce the staff or eliminate the HTU units that are in many of these jurisdictions. So I think there needs to be political pressure placed along some of these local governments to encourage them to, in fact, beef up their existing units rather than reduce the units. Now, I'm not referencing the GBI there because they want more resources. The director's been great in this area. Brian, all the folks I work with in the HT unit have been great. But I think some of the municipal police forces are feeling a little pressure that, hey, we don't need the publicity you're giving us. And I have the opposite view. No child should ever be sexually abused. We have to do everything we can every day to stop it. And politicians need to get out of the way and let law enforcement do their job. So I think that message needs to get across. Now, clearly, since Joe's in the room, let me mention that the first municipality that joined the Street Race Georgia Not Buying It program was Brookhaven, and we're looking forward to more cities doing that. We'd love to have more cities doing it, where they're training their city employees, they're training their officers, they're training anyone and everyone they can to know the signs to assist. But the Brookhavens are the minority that are willing to take the issue on. More governments want to make believe the issue doesn't exist. So we could use your support to tell the local elected officials, get engaged.
More questions?
We can prosecute people who have participated in child exploitation and human trafficking. We are more interested in jail time and getting them off the street so that they can't continue the cycle. But you did mention fines, and so my question is probably a very elementary one. But when you do collect those fines for someone that you did successfully put away for a certain amount of time, does that go directly back into funding your program so that you can continue the work you do? Or
So the fines aren't worth talking about. Because once you put the person in jail, where's the money? So now that you have the new asset forfeiture, yeah, you'll be able to have the car, you'll be able to have some dollars that way. That's why SR7 was so important. That's why my office spent countless hours with Renee Unnerman, Andy Welch, Chuck Castration, anyone and everyone to try and work on that language. We know the state of Georgia is going to get sued with regard to SR7 because it's a different funding mechanism than previously existed in our state to try and help Georgia Cares and provide the funding. So we spent a lot of time on the legalese involved in both SB 8 and SR7. But I would suggest to you, the government, whether it's via SR7 or basic nonprofits, need to be doing all they can on the funding side without looking at it from coming from fines and forfeitures. Because the majority of the folks that we indict or we imprison don't have a bank account at our access.
And then just to add to that now, as far as the fines and forfeiture, and we, even before the new state laws, we were using a lot of the federal asset forfeiture when we were making our cases. So, and the way that program worked was, yes, we would take some of those items, we would see some of those items, and yes, we would use them to assist us or to aid us in our investigation. And some of them had some pretty elaborate stuff, cars, homes, jewelry, that type of stuff, and we would use that in our undercover operations, not necessarily. So if we see some items here, we might send it to another task force in another state, so that they could use it where, and vice versa, because you know, basically you would know these items here. So the object is, okay, if they know this car here, we'll send it to someplace where they don't know the car, and they will send it to us. So it's not that we take it, you know, because a lot of people think that we are just taking things just to keep for ourselves. So it's not that we take it and use it. We might see something and we will send it to another task force located somewhere else across the country so that they can have resources to help with their undercover operations. And then we would have something that no one's seen here to aid in ours. So we do a lot of that police try and find very resourceful ways to get the resources we need because budgets are tight everywhere. So if we do use those laws to help us as best we can.
I am a dreamer, so I was just hopeful that when you're able to collect something, you directly benefit from it so that you can continue to work. My final question is very quick. It's very common for employers and frankly, even if you want to volunteer in church for them to do background checks and things of that nature on you. So these people who are listed on the child predator list, and I probably didn't give it the right name, sex predator list, that does show up in routine background checks for agencies that are licensed to do that. Is that a true statement?
It's public.
So we start.
It's public.
Okay.
You
And then what I was going to say.
go on the website. You don't use GCIC for that.
I thought that was out there. I know as a mom, I've Googled before to see how many are in my zip code. I didn't need the name, but it just helped me be aware of my geographic locations. Thank you for putting.
And then just to add to that, another thing is, again, and if we find someone that's in your neighborhood who is on the registry and either is not having a proper address or isn't listed at all, and you find out who they are, or there is somewhere where they are, you can contact your local sheriff's department and make them aware of that. Each sheriff's department is supposed to have their own section of unit, and make them aware of that, and they can start an investigation into that individual. So again, it goes back to, just because they're not on that list doesn't mean there's not a recourse. So, and that's another way of just keeping an eye out and saying, okay, here's the individual who's doing some things, we're finding out, because Google is, I guess, the answer to everything. You Google something, you'll find out. So, you might find out that they were doing something in a whole other state, but now they're living across from you, and you're like, what's the situation? And then there are resources for you to find out exactly what the situation is to help protect your own, the children.
Do you have any? Yeah.
I just wanted to piggyback off of that. So, I know it's public information, but how often is the department is updating that information?
That's updated on a continuous basis. The database is, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation houses the database, and the entries are made by the local sheriff's office, and they're also made by the prison system earlier at the time of sentencing, and then the prison system notifies if and when they're ever released. But every jurisdiction has a person who is responsible for maintaining that, and oftentimes, and I think we alluded to this earlier, we'll do compliance checks before we go out and audit what we see on the sex offender registry by actually knocking on the doors and ensuring that that individual is where they are, and if they are not where they are registered, then an investigation is initiated to find that person, and there are appropriate criminal sanctions for violation of that.
Well, great. You had some great questions. You did exactly what I asked you to do. Before we go to our next panel, let's give this panel a hand. I also want to recognize two other legislators that have come in the room. Representative Tanya Anderson, I'm going to call her Peterson all the time, and my colleague from the Senate, our minority whip, Vincent Ford.
Dick.
Thank you so much. That was a very informative panel. We could not be safe without our one person.
Oh, 'cause you're beautiful like a flower, more valuable than a diamond. You are powerful like a fire. You can heal the world with your mind, and there is nothing in the world that you cannot do.
first, but this is their second performance. Y'all get their information and tell everybody about these babies, okay? Oh, come take a picture so we can go more than welcome. You know, we got a whole, well, we have an hour, so we'll work that out. Because what we're gonna do, while we're talking, instead of coming back to do policy proposal recommendations, we're gonna wrap it all into one, because what I'm gonna be doing is writing down your stories. Your stories will give us what the policy recommendations need to be, because you're gonna kind of tell us what we're lacking, and that will help us. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because we've got to get this done. We can't just talk about it, we gotta be about it. And so, I'm trying to find who's a program advocate for Dollar Ministries. Sitting beside her should be Katrina Owens, founder of Empower Mentoring. This is not in the right order.
It is.
It doesn't.
Bowling.
My paper says Jeff Shaw.
No.
So he's down there. So Jeff Shaw is the director of Out of Darkness, and then.
I should keep my mouth shut.
That's Kate. Oh, yeah, Kate.
Kate's on the other end, so no. So we're all out of it. That's okay. So we have Kate, Napier, and Napier, student advocate, one voice. And then we have Courtney's beside her, so that would be Courtney Dow, director of Nightlight Atlanta. So you must be Mary Frances Bowley, founder of Wellspring Living. And so we have the six of you here on the panel, and I'm going to write down beside each of your names a policy recommendation. Now I want you to tell me at the end of your conversation. But first, I would like you to introduce yourself, what your particular organization does, and how is this impactful in the sex human trafficking community. And we're going to begin with you, Ms. Cheryl Allen.
Thank you. My name is Cheryl Allen, and I'm currently the outreach coordinator for Prestige. It was founded by Pastor Taffy L. Dollar at World Changers Church International about 7 years ago. And what we do is we deal with human sex trafficking, where we currently go out and help rescue the young ladies that are being trafficked, as well as we visit up to 22 strip clubs and heavily prostituted areas as well. What we do, we currently offer housing, we offer tuition assistance, legal help, and just different avenues. So when they get ready to transition out of their lifestyle, then they'll be able to have some kind of positive format to go by. And that's what we do.
Well, one more second, I'm sorry, Jennifer Swain, you're supposed to be on the panel. You're not?
Yes, you are.
Because someone said you were supposed to come in this morning. And so it got confused, so come on, join we'll make one, just come on up, sit right here, we'll work it out, so you can say something. Okay, so that's Jennifer Swain, and she was gonna come in this morning, and you were the youth spark, correct? Okay, come on, don't worry. I'm sorry about that. Okay, go ahead, Katrina. Shirley's name is her back. Okay.
Good afternoon, my name is Katrina Owens. I am the founder of Empower Mentoring, and I work one-on-one with survivors of sex trafficking that are transitioning. Some are still in the life, some are transitioning out of the life. In regards to policy, some of the greatest needs that we currently have are housing. Housing is a huge challenge. Transportation is becoming more and more important as well. Thank you very much. And income, skill building opportunities, and jobs and resources for girls and young women that are transitioning.
Mary Frances Foley, Wellspring Living has been working with survivors of trafficking and exploitation for about 14 years, providing residential care for girls ages 12 to 17 and young women ages 18 to 25. This fall we opened a new initiative, which is community-based, called Empowered Living Academy, and where we invite any young woman between the ages of 18 and 32 who have been trafficked or at risk for trafficking to come into the Carver YMCA, where they have a 10-week type mini technical school, helping them to be able to be prepared for work, and in a partnership with Ronstadt US. And they do professional trainings on Friday, and then the girls are able to go into a paid apprenticeship after they complete the 10 weeks, and then hopefully move into a living wage employment.
Hi everybody, my name is Courtney Dow, and I'm with Nightlight. Nightlight is an international organization. We started in Bangkok, Thailand, and in Bangkok we serve victims of commercial sexual exploitation in so many different ways. I've lived in Bangkok for 2 years, and while I was there, I worked with women from Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, Burma, Laos, India, Uzbekistan, Ukraine, Turkey, Uganda, and Kenya that were all trafficked to our little red light district in Bangkok. We worked with children as young as 4 years old who were being trafficked there. And that was kind of my education in the issue of what I learned to call it as sex trafficking. I am a rehabilitation counselor by trade, and I came back here because I was born and raised here in Atlanta, Georgia. And so we started a nightlight office here in Atlanta in 2008, and we work to address the issue through prevention, intervention, restoration, and education. So we work with at-risk kids, that's prevention. It might have already been said, but the average age of entry into prostitution in the United States is between the ages of 11 and 14 years old, so that's middle school age. So we work with children who are at risk. Intervention, we go into strip clubs and brothels similar to Prestige. We build relationships with men and women who are working in the sex industry. Restoration is the long, drawn-out part. Yes, Mary Frances, yes. And it just takes so many different forms. And rescue, even in the media would have you believe that that's the hard part, that's the relatively easy part compared to the lifelong restoration process. And then lastly, education is to address things like policy and demand, sexual brokenness, those kinds of things. So, policy thing, so there's so many things. I'm gonna go with transportation. If we could get our public transportation system expanded into other neighborhoods, make it run more frequently, we could get individuals to jobs. It would address our poverty issue tremendously. There's groupings of poverty throughout our city, and it makes it very difficult for them to get to jobs. So even when people will hire our women, the women can't get to those jobs. And so I'm going to go with transportation.
Hello, my name is Kate Napier. I'm a rising junior studying physics at Georgia Tech, and I am on the executive board of One Voice Atlanta, which is a student-led organization at Tech working to end sex trafficking in Atlanta. I am responsible for planning all of the meetings, which occur weekly and are attended by 10 or 15 students. At meetings, we try to do hands-on activities because I think students find that most meaningful. We have written letters to representatives thanking them for their support of efforts to stop sex trafficking, and then urging them to take further steps towards legislation that would properly enforce the pre-existing, legislation, correctly punish the perpetrators of the crimes, and appropriately help the victims and survivors. We also have made gift bags for women who have been a part of sex trafficking, and we gave those to Wellspring Living. One of my favorite parts of being in One Voice is something that we started this past fall, which is participating in an after-school program with Action Ministries, which is a nonprofit that does housing, food, and education programs. So once a month we go there, a group of students from One Voice, and we plan a STEM-related curriculum, so science, technology, engineering, and math. And so the first lesson we did last fall was related to space, which I love because I want to be an astronaut. So the kids really related that. I did too. And so most of these kids have no relationship with anyone in college or anyone who's ever been to college, and they come from the highest concentration of poverty in the Southeast, so they're at risk for becoming trafficked or becoming traffickers. So we're there to encourage them to always have a mind that wants to learn and to pursue higher education. We did an Earth Day themed one a few weeks ago. We also hosted the National Human Sex Trafficking Conference in January, and we, in the past, have done a donor Donut Dash, which consists of teams signing up, running half of the race, eating a dozen donuts between the team members, and then running back. And let's see, we try to educate other students on tech about sex trafficking. We do tabling sometimes. We have like opportunities a few times a week where students can stand at a booth or a table out on a common area in the Texas campus and advocate for whatever they're passionate about. So we've done that before too. Being a part of One Voice is one of my greatest joys at Tech, so I'm very thankful for the work.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff. I'm the director out of Darkness, and to kind of frame up what we do, I always ask the question because I have the great joy of having lunch with you all who are here for lunch, and just hearing the talk of our youth and our children and investing in them and seeing them rise up to be leaders. Where I come in is the question of what happens when that child victim of sex trafficking turns 18? Prostitution. That's all of a sudden there's this drop off in our community care. We love the children, we want to rescue and see the children be all they can be, but when that child turns 18, oh, she's just a prostitute. And so we're passionate about reaching the adults that are in the commercial sexual exploitation industry, and I'm steering more and more away in my journey from using the term sex trafficking because it's such a limited, defined term that excludes so much of what we're really dealing with. And if you had time to spend with the survivors and hear their stories, you would say, wait, you're the girl I saw in the corner that I wrote off as a prostitute. That story doesn't. And so instead of just saying, I only care about sex trafficking, one of my challenges to you all as you step into this is to broaden your horizon and say, we can't end sex trafficking, which is real and is happening here, and leave strip clubs and pornography industry and prostitution alone, because as long as those things exist, there will be sex trafficking. And so what we do reaches into areas where women are still engaged in street level, motel level, truck stop prostitution. We go into the jails because these ladies are being arrested for drug possession and petty theft and all kinds of things. Their stories aren't being heard, so they're being criminalized. So we go meet them in the jail and we cast a vision for a new future for them. And then we have a 24-hour hotline where our partners can call if they encounter someone who needs to be picked up immediately. Law enforcement, hospitals, the women themselves, if they've jumped into any time, day or night. Sometimes it's noon at a Waffle House, sometimes it's 3 a.m. In a dangerous apartment complex. We're going to send a team to get them, and Courtney is absolutely right. Rescue is the easy part. After that, if there's not a commitment over the long term to say, okay, it's not so simple as you're not in that situation anymore, so get your life together. Well, she never finished high school. She never learned how to drive a car. She doesn't have credit. She can't get a lease for an apartment. All these things, are we prepared as a community to come around these individuals and walk out the long-term process with them? And so we help start that journey, and then we all rely heavily on each other to stay in our lanes and utilize the resources that we have, but we are still massively under-resourced. And I'm going to save my policy recommendation. Yeah, you're going to come back to that?
Okay. Thank you so much, Jeff. And now, did you have this spoken? So if you could go, Jennifer. Okay.
Hi, I'm first going to apologize for the mix-up this morning and the other panelists, because I really believe I can totally run out of here and they are rock stars in their own right and will be able to give you guys more than enough information. I'm really grateful to the Legislative Black Caucus for including us. I am Jennifer Swain. I'm the Deputy Director for Youth Spark, and we were originally born in the Fulton County Juvenile Court as one of the first organizations created to respond to the needs of the girls who were then coming through the juvenile court system and treated as criminals, locked up, and then waiting for help. And so I am really grateful to hear all of the different perspectives of the organization, because that really is one of the things that makes the Georgia statewide response so powerful, is because we have a spectrum of organizations that work on this continuum. And I've provided a document for you guys Because what we do today in Youth Spark, our focus is very different, and we worked in the area of rescue and recovery through Angela's house, but today our work is primarily surrounding early intervention and prevention. We recognize all of those things that happen to the young people before they end up with the pimp, before they end up on the street, before they end up in the club. And that's one of the things that we're really working now to educate the community on, because rescue, again, is very powerful, but residential services are very expensive. It takes a lot for law enforcement and for service providers to heal that child back. So one of the things that I'm very passionate about is reaching out to young people, empowering young people to have a voice, even in the legislative process, because they will be 18 soon. And I really want people to see on that sheet of paper that you guys have, it really allows you to recognize all of those things that happen to the child. The left side of that piece of paper is really the continuum of abuse that was created by GYMS in New York. And the right side of that is what we've created as a response to that, and we work with that through our youth and juvenile court for girls ages 11 to 17 who do not self-identify as a victim, or they're headed down that path, and we want to either get them into safety, get them to a safe house, or reduce that behavior and teach them how to be advocates. So thank you for having us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to switch out for one moment. Representative Anderson is going to continue to moderate while I go out and do a couple of interviews. But just, again, let me remind you, all of this is being taped. Not only is it being taped, I know you see the cameras in this room, so we have legislators and other people who are watching it. Sometimes it's hard for them to get to the Capitol because some of them live all across the state, even though we had one just come in from Valdosta, so it took him a minute to get here, Representative Dexter Sharper, but he's here. So he's trying to come. People are watching, don't they? Because you don't see people in the room. Cameras are always everywhere in this Capitol, okay? And so we're going to keep recording because I want you all to be able to see, so you'll be able to see this entire panel uploaded on all of our all of our social media channels. I'm getting better with social media. Okay, Representative Anderson is going to take over the mic. Okay.
Thank you again, panelists, for being here with us today and for all that you do in our community. Do we have any questions from our audience for our panelists? Yes. Please stand and speak up loudly.
Hey, John, you want to come up there here? You need to be on the speaker? You want them to come up there here? You want them to come up there too?
And the one thing that I want to do is congratulate all of you as this acknowledge that you really address this problem. As you all have mentioned, it is indeed a macro level issue. And it's going to take a macro level solution. But the one thing that I found that was sort of missing in the discourse was it seemed a little gendered to me. Having worked in Philadelphia around LGBT youth issues, especially in the correctional facilities, there were a lot of identified gay male and transgender male and females who were also involved in commercial sex work. So I wanted to just ask, to what degree does the initiatives expand beyond female gender? Because as you know, the Metro Atlanta area has one of the highest populations of identified Black and Latino men who identify as gay, essentially. Thank you.
I think probably other people will have comments too, but first of all, you hit on one of the absolute biggest gaps, not only in Atlanta and Georgia, but across the United States. And the only place I'm aware that even has a proactive approach to the boys and the men is in Massachusetts. And I think there's a couple things. One is just we don't know what to do. Just being totally honest and transparent. We don't know what to do. I think we're all willing. And we had a young man come to us who was from the LGBTQ community and said, hey, I'm engaged in survival sex, I'm an alcoholic, I need help. And all we could say to him was, we're here for you too, but it's gonna look different because we don't have a safe house for you. So will you be patient? And we'll do what we can as we can, but we're committed to you. Now what that's gonna look like, I can't tell you. But that commitment is there, but I think what we've realized is even in the struggle we have for the resources for the populations that we're already serving, being so difficult to come by, it's so hard to expand into new services too. And so I think if we as a community can start saying this out loud like you just did, because there's such a discomfort, because when you talk about boys, you're already bringing in that extra layer of homosexuality too. And oh, well, we're uncomfortable enough talking about commercial sexual exploitation. Now we have to talk about homosexuality too. And so those are conversations we have to start having and being willing to engage in and not come up against, get really uncomfortable, and then withdraw. And so to your point, it is absolutely happening here in Atlanta. And there's a lady named LaRonda Gibbons in the Department of Juvenile Justice who has made this her rally cry. She is the voice for the boys. And so she's working really hard to start tapping into those resources in Massachusetts and even overseas, UK and places that are addressing it, and say, okay, how are we now going to respond to this in Atlanta? So I'm glad you brought that up.
If I could just add one thing to that, one of the things that we recognize that as a community, we respond with girls all the time because that's the research that we have. That's the history that we have. And while we do recognize that it does happen to boys, one of the very things that we wanted to do at Youth Spark is to figure out how to find out the story of that, how to begin to create a methodology by which we can actually count male victims. And so earlier this year, we commissioned a study on boys. Now that study was just released on May 5th, but I will give you guys, and it is open for public, and so I'll be sure to pass that link along so that you guys can share it as well. One of the things that we do recognize is there's a lack of services. So I know that there is one safe house right now, Buddy's House, that is already in the works, that is really trying to get the feet on the ground and get all of their licensure and things together so they can begin serving boys. And there is survivor leadership on that with Buddy's House as well. And that is going to be the first home for boys here in Georgia. Secondly, the research, one of the main things that we found out about the research is that there is really such a high demand, and it's not coming from a cluster here in just the Atlanta metro area. This is a statewide response, and the ad that we had in that research study not only had responses throughout the state of Georgia, all the way from the north end to the south end, all the way up, and if you pulled out a little bit, you also saw responses to that ad coming from other states, even as far as Hawaii. One of the things that we know about boys in this issue from this study is that survival sex and the way that they operate is really driving that, and it is closely connected to their gender or sexual identity. And we're going to have to address the acceptance of that in order for us to be able to protect boys and provide the services that they need. Moreover, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap that right now, but moreover, one of the most shocking things about this study is that we found that the buyers who perpetuate the problem, because nobody could sell anybody if nobody wanted to buy it. The buyers in this case were heterosexual men who were not necessarily paid for the sex act that we know, the way that we know it. They were heterosexual men paid for the secret, paid for the secret to be kept. And these men don't identify as gay. So what we're really going to have to do is peel back the layers on that and begin to educate the community. Number one, in the form of acceptance for young boys who are questioning, for young boys who are identifying in ways that their family or their inner circle may not connect. But we're also going to have to address the identity of those men who don't identify as gay and have that little secret.
Wow. Great question. Great input. I promise I'm not done. I'm gonna let everybody say something that wants to say something. Great revelation. Because some of this we don't know because we haven't been exposed to as much as we possibly can. But the more you tell us, the better it is to help us formulate policy. So.
Okay, so our office in Bangkok, obviously there's a large population of transgender individuals in Bangkok, and so we have interacted a lot more with those individuals there. And so we've been able to kind of try some services out, and like Jeff said, the women are complex enough. When you start adding gender identity issues, the biggest issue that I so we recently started doing outreach into a few male strip clubs, and they are so grateful and so open to relationship and desiring healthy mentors in their lives. And we are just begging for men who, especially healthy men, to come alongside and work with those individuals. And because of the issues of homosexuality and people being comfortable or uncomfortable or those kinds of questions, we can't find men to do that with us.
Tanya?
Thank you so much. Any other questions? Yes.
My question is coming from the criminal justice area. Why is there criminal assaults? Why are there criminal assaults against gay men as opposed to women?
According to Melissa Farley, who is a researcher in San Francisco, she found that the number of rapes, beatings, those kinds of things are between males and females are not statistically different. Neither is it different for women who or individuals who are working in strip clubs, brothels, streets. They're also not statistically different.
Okay, I'm not sure I got the answer I was looking for.
So you're wondering why does it seem like the
Criminal assaults against, non-gay men against gay men as opposed to gay women, lesbian women. You never hear about women being assaulted, lesbians being assaulted. But you always hear about men, gay men being assaulted.
I'll speak to it from a male perspective of what, and I'm sure there are people who have better knowledge on this than me, but there is such a undercurrent of homophobia, especially in the South, that whenever anybody bumps up against that, I think especially as a man, the response is violence. And so anything that makes me uncomfortable, and I say me, speaking as a man, not me personally, but anything that makes me uncomfortable, anything that challenges my own perceptions of my masculinity and my response, I'm going to do the manly thing and be violent. Just like we see in all the undercurrents of violence. But there's so much to cover in this, but the perversion of pornography, I'm jumping around here, but within masculinity, there's also this perverted sense of enjoying lesbianism and hating the gay male act. And so I think that gets a little bit, and it's so much more layered, but that's my best explanation to why you hear of men assaulting gay men, but not lesbian women. Yeah.
Women are still assaulted, just not lesbians.
That's right.
And I think one of the things that I am able to see working with the young girls in our voices groups, we have groups every Thursday, and I learned so much by being a part of their lives, because I think we as adults, we are so very far removed from the role that teens face with social media and the role that they face with what's out there and what's acceptable. I can remember in high school, there were no same-sex prom dates. There was just something, if you were gay, you just didn't talk about it until years later. Today is very widely accepted more. It's totally okay in some areas, and so one of the things that we recognize working with our girls that, lesbian relationships or girl-on-girl relationships, that's celebrated. It's celebrated in the music. It's celebrated in television. And a lot of people don't respond to that as if it's anything bad. But if you are a male, and dare I say a black male, it really is a horrible thing when you don't get to sometimes celebrate who you are. You have to live with these social stigmas. And so I recognize that for a lot of us, what we see on TV and what we see on the internet is something that we never used to see. So the teens are facing something very different. They are allowed to have social norms that's going to be very hard for us to deal with as adults. And that's one of the things that I try to get people to recognize, that this is normal for teenagers. It's not normal for us, well, some of us, but it's not normal as well. So one of the things that I see is that there seems to be this double standard when it comes to women versus men. And And there's a lot of men, I think, that have a harder time dealing with those feelings and then accepting them in its own right. And I will take the time to just apologize to that I have to testify for a case. I'm going to be running out, but I just want to say something.
No. Anybody else? One, two. One more. Do we have another question? Sure.
Yes, actually my question is very Francis. I don't know if the panel was here earlier. My name is Alicia Keel. I'm with Black on Purpose TV, and we're also a filmmaker. And one of the reasons I'm here today is research, because we're working on a film. I hate the back page. I don't know if this, everybody was shaking their head. Okay, so you're with me. I don't know any of you, and see that's a problem. You know, and I'm in media. I don't know any of you. So if I don't know you, then the person, everyday person on the street doesn't know who you are. So my question, Mary, and anybody else, give me a case, give me an incident that I can share with the world, and they will say, oh my God, we need to pay more attention to this. Because I'm telling you, as intelligent as you all are, you can see the people in here. We need a case. We need a terrible, and it's unfortunate to say this, it's like driving down the street. When you see the wreck, everybody rubbernecks, everybody slows down, everybody wants to know what happened. So give me a case, a boy, a girl, where when everybody hears us talk about it, Black on Purpose TV, they say, oh my God. And will all of you give me an opportunity to interview you at a later date and time?
Well, quite honestly, most survivors, and I think most people, do not feel they want their story out for everybody to know, the horror of it. And as a provider, we're also responsible to be protected. And so when we share stories, which we do share stories, they are not of one particular girl. It might be one person's experience in trafficking, another person's experience along another part of the journey. It's in respect to them. And so I understand it doesn't sell. I mean, we have trouble with that all the time.
Maybe I didn't say it right.
No.
Give me a case where someone is not here, that we have lost because of this terrible ordeal.
Courtney's got the case.
Okay. See what I'm saying? So, and the reason why I say that is I did a film on a young man named Kendrick Johnson.
Yes.
Immediately, she said, yeah, and she knows it immediately. And there are a lot of things that we're going to be able to do in the future to help other children in our schools, because we took his case and we didn't take advantage of it, but we used this case to teach the world a lot of problems in reference to when we lose our children at school. So I'm saying that we have lost. All of you know a case where we've lost someone. And give me that person, let me help me research that person so we can teach the world. If we don't get a hold of this sex trafficking deal, this is one of the outcomes.
Courtney has definitely got the case you're wanting here.
So in a study in Canada on prostitution and pornography found that the mortality rate for individuals in prostitution was 40 times higher than the national average. And so
40
times higher in Canada. And so what we know as service providers is that this is often a matter of life and death, and it's common that we don't know if when we interact with somebody if it's going to be the last time that we see them. And so we actually in our house have 3 photos of girls who have passed away. One from HIV/AIDS, another one from suicide, and another one from murder. And the girls from suicide and murder were both here from Atlanta. The girl who was murdered, we met her when she was 17. She was pregnant by her pimp, and she was working in a brothel. And we built a relationship with her. She had her baby. And when she, just after her 19th birthday, her baby was 5 months old, she was found beaten to death. And as far as I know, this would be a great thing for you to investigate. The killer was never found. And the only reason I can share her story, or I feel comfortable sharing her story, is because her family's given me permission to do so.
What's her name?
Her name's Imani Green.
And then I want to
What's that? Spell it.
Imani, I-M-A-N-I, Green.
Green.
And I know, Jeff, you have.
Yeah, I think the challenge, you've actually like raised a deeper issue to the surface, and it's that if you try to research any of these girls, you won't find anything because they're nameless and faceless. Like they're not investigating the murder of a girl in prostitution. It is a problem, but you can't go interview, maybe Imani's, but a lot of these girls, you can't go interview their family because they ran away 10 years ago, or they went through 30 foster care homes, or like the issue is the reason that the community is not coming running around. One of the things that being languaged around trafficking is, this could be your daughter, this could be your daughter. Think of if it was your daughter. And most people can look and say, it'll never be my daughter. Like, so it'll be some. But we've got to start thinking about it as it's somebody, period, and that's enough. And so you hit, I mean, without even realizing you were doing it, you hit on the big point, and that's that these are the forgotten and the nameless and the faceless, and that should be enough. And I know it's easier for me to say, give that ideal, be an idealist and say that should be enough for us to care.
Well, it definitely doesn't happen. Sex trafficking doesn't just stand alone.
Right.
And in addressing that issue, just as I said, the story is so much deeper than that. So I would have to ask you, what would be the purpose of you documenting that tragic story? Because there's also another side of it that isn't often documented, and it's the side of the women who are now entrepreneurs, biochemists, judges, who were also victims. And, just is that, everyone's not chosen to tell their story.
Right.
And there are certain people that are chosen to tell their story, and they choose to do so. So in documenting and bringing awareness to it, I would encourage you not to focus just on the tragic story, because
Yes, ma'am.
it is very easy to disconnect from that.
Yes, ma'am.
But when you have connected with the introduction of this everyday person that you would have no idea, and then begin to unfold those layers to just kind of track back to where that all started and what made that person who they are today. You can find a lot more success stories than tragic stories from a survivor standpoint. And what I don't want to do, only because when a girl is in the life, the subculture that exists, the feeling of never being equal, of always being stuck in that lifestyle, documenting that tragic story only perpetuates that idea that already exists. So I would be very careful with that, because yes, it's very important to inform the community that's not aware, but we also have to be very careful in not keeping girls trapped in that mind state, in that lifestyle that they're already in. So I would be very, very careful in regards to that, because she can give you 20 stories, I can give you 20 stories, pretty sure she has quite a few as well. And I can tell you some tragic stories of girls that I shared the block with that didn't make it. But it's just a very fine line, because you gotta be very certain of who your audience is. Yes.
I'm glad you said that. I always like to say, what is the motivation behind the individual? That's fair.
Absolutely.
I am not in your field. I can't imagine putting that work every day. That taking that home every day. That's not what I do. I am a storyteller. I've written 8 books. I've shot films and videos. This is what I do. And there are some great things about what we do, and then there are some terrible things about what we do. Okay?
You can't ask me as a filmmaker to think about doing their job. I can't do that. What I can do is tell the story honestly and help bring attention to what you're doing. Okay? There are women and men who have been violated. I spoke earlier today when I was 6 years old. I had an 18-year-old female babysitter that I had service for an entire year. So this is not just some issue for me. It's something that I experienced as a kid. All right? But what I'm saying is, and it's the unfortunate part of what we do, we can't sell the good stuff. I didn't make that world. We do all the time. We tell positive stories all the time, and nobody pays attention to it. They start tearing up Baltimore, and every channel, every social media explodes. So what I'm saying to you, and I'm saying this honestly, that if I have stories of beautiful people who got caught up in this environment, let us tell those stories. If you know the Kendrick Johnson case, okay, he was a beautiful child. You know the case. He's a beautiful child. And because we lost that life, we're going to be able to do some things to protect other children down the world. That's my goal. That is what I want to do.
So are you seeking a tragic end, or are you just
No. We want to take a tragic story and tell that story, and then at the end of it, we want to tell about you people and how we are able, and the things that need to be done to prevent this from again. Because the very first thing that I said is, I don't know any of them.
And I think not knowing them is not a bad thing, but they don't have to work. And right, we don't have but they don't have to tell a story. They don't have to tell a bad story in order for you to know them. But they can tell you what services they provide or what nonprofit organization they work for versus telling you a bad story.
I said that wrong. I don't know your organization.
Thank you.
Okay, it's not necessarily you. We don't know your organization. And if I don't know your organization, I don't know what to tell a child who's caught up in that life where to turn to. I don't know.
Go ahead, what question?
I actually just wanted to address the issue of media and what's being told. I cannot give you full details, but there is a local television station that is covering this story. They're in the process of working the story right now.
Which story?
It's in reference to the safe harbor legislation, and we'll be interviewing individuals who work in sex trafficking and are currently now advocates for those in sex trafficking, and we'll talk about how they got out the life and what they are currently doing to make their lives whole. So I just wanted to acknowledge that you wanted that you said that there wasn't any media attention on this, and I just really wanted to know that there is currently media attention on this to address this.
Okay, you got a question?
Yeah, well, I wanted to know what the atmosphere is like in terms of making a push for those who willingly and knowingly profiteer off of it from the periphery. And what I mean is that the motels, like a mile from here. Now, and I was just talking to a representative about that, about the push, about those who profit off of it knowingly, knowing that a crime is being committed, knowing that a child is being exploited, and it's less than a mile from here, it's a block from here, it's right under our noses. What about the push? I'm sorry.
I said down the street from you.
And down the street, they're all over the city, and people are. It's a crime committed out in the daylight. People don't see it. So I wanted to know about the push to. I don't know, for those who facilitated those to make them culpable or liable legally or from legislation in terms of if you go to a motel and that guy knows what's going on. I mean, you know, I guess we're getting into a slippery slope. Am I making sense? Can anyone talk about that? About those who profiteer off of it from the periphery? I mean, those are also people who are making money off of a lot of money, and they know what's going on.
I would say to that we have some of the most powerful law enforcement groups And one of the laws that a lot of people don't know about is third party to a crime or keeping a place of prostitution. And one of the great things that happened in the Georgia legislature this year was the fact that for the very first time, we shine the spotlight on one of those third party groups that says, hey, whether you directly or indirectly perpetuate the problem, you need to also be a part of the solution. Now, through Attorney General Sam Olin's Georgia's Not Buying It campaign, I trained hundreds of city ambassadors when the Final Four came to Atlanta, hotel workers, and for the first time, I was able to get through the door quite easy. And it wasn't because it's, hey, it's Final Four, we have this group coming into town. It was because Attorney General Sam Olin said, y'all need to make this happen. There were plenty of times I could call and say, we have this great free training, we'll come in and do it for you, and they say, no, thank you. The Western Peachtree Plaza was one of the first hotels that said, we'll let you train everybody, from the wait staff to the valet to the parking attendants. And when we wanted to applaud them, they said no. We wanted to write up for them, and they said no. And we said, why? And they said, because we don't want to look like we're the hotel, the only hotel where it's happening. The Hilton Atlanta participates in quarterly trainings for all hotel workers, and they also work well hand in hand with the Atlanta Police Department to ensure that they work and have scenes in their very hotels. We do now recognize that when a person comes into Atlanta for a business trip, because we are a thriving convention city, and your hotel, you get in the back of that cab and he says, I know where you can have some fun, that cab driver can also be charged.
Okay. Oh, really?
So we have laws on the books
Really?
for that to happen. We're teaching prosecutors as you are using these tools to stack charges, because you can't always just get one pretty charge. There may be some things in there where that hotel worker actually did get kind of looped into that case. But when it's a child molestation charge, you don't see and hear all of the trafficking stuff that happened underneath it, because the legislators want to get the biggest bang for their buck. So they know how to stack certain charges, but I do recognize that there is a need that we attack the hotels, because if the hotels can rent by the hour, I think we know what's happening there. And we have to make sure that they are aware that you are just as liable as the people that you're renting to. So we are heading in the right direction. And it may not be accepted or perceived well, because I caught a lot of slack from people outside of Georgia for the policies, that the provision in our safe harbor that says we can vote to say whether or not strip clubs need to provide funding into a certain fund for this. There was a lot of slack. People actually said to me personally, you just want that money for your organization. I will never see that money. You Spark will never see that money. They said that I am taking dirty money. I don't believe that I'm taking dirty money. Why? Because I sat down with some of the survivor leaders here, and they accepted that bill, they agreed to that bill, and they supported that bill. And if we can provide provisions that say, if you are a man that pays for sex, whether it's with a child or not, whether you knew her age or not, if we're going to charge you a fine, as we do for DUI and everybody else, and that fine goes to victim services, if we can take it from the buyers, if we can take it from the Johns, we can take it from those businesses who are acting as pimps and buyers, and that is the club. And that's just fine. It's just
Also, it's not just wholesale.
No, that's what I meant. They're right down the street.
Require certain business establishments such as hotels, strip clubs, things of that nature, to post a national hotline number for people who are involved in human trafficking. A little over a month ago, some people from One Voice volunteered for the International Human Trafficking Institute, which is run under the Center for Civil and Human Rights downtown. And we walked around some places in Atlanta, right around here, and out of the probably 10 or 15 places that I visited, only the Emory Hospital was compliant with the law. It's not strictly enforced right now, but if it were to be strictly enforced, then the first time is a warning and the second time is a $10,000 fine. So it's not being strictly enforced right now, but it should be.
What is your first name? It seems to be scratched out.
Kate.
Kate. Okay. I just have one quick question. Just another quick question. Then I gotta go. But I wanted to. It seems like lunacy to me that it's 25-1. I was maybe the statistic is wrong, but I was at the Jimmy Carter event last week when they were talking about worldwide sex trafficking, and the prosecution of men or women to men is 25-1. Now, I don't know if y'all talked about that earlier. I got here a little late, had another event, but I wanted to find out what's behind that and how. I mean, that doesn't make sense. That's just like the cocaine crack law that used to be 100-1. It doesn't. It's ludicrous.
It's very real. It is a very real number. And what's very interesting about that number is that when you have a trafficker that's on trial, quite often you have a girl that's willing to testify. Many of these girls want to move on with their life. They don't want to think about it another day. They want to compartmentalize it in the back of their mind. I never stood on trial with my pimp. Never. Why? Because it meant more for me to move on with my life. And at that time, I was so young, I was still in love with it. So there were so many other things going on with that transition and understanding what that looks like moving forward. And a lot of girls don't want to talk about it. You know, when you talk about not wanting to share their stories, they don't want to share their stories. I didn't want to share my story for almost 10 years afterwards. But again, some people are called to do it.
But it seems like to me that the women, the girls, underage girls are being prosecuted where the men are being slapped on the wrist and let go. That's the part I'm talking about.
And that is it, because who's being caught in the act?
Well, they both are. You can't have sex by
They both are
yourself.
being caught in the act. I thought you were speaking of the trafficker. But you have the trafficker that's standing afar.
Well, I guess I'm talking about the Johns. I'm talking
And the Johns, well, that's a whole nother story.
Wait, can I?
Yes, let's break down some definitions. Buyers is the John that's purchasing sex from the victim that's being exploited and being trafficked by the trafficker.
Right.
So, yes.
Because you can't have a thriving business without a clientele.
But let me ask you this, who's the buyer? And that's why the laws haven't changed.
I think that what you said, the terminology is there are people in our lives who we love named John, and to say that a buyer of sex is called a John really doesn't fully criminalize the people who are committing such horrible acts. So we need to call them what they are. They're buyers of sex from children. So
Also, the conversations that I've had with law enforcement, they said that in terms of resources, it is cheaper to do a sting to arrest women in prostitution than it is to arrest Johns.
Wow. Cheaper? You say cheaper?
Cheaper. It takes less resources.
Yeah, no, I understand. I just wanted to make sure I know what you're saying.
Okay, so maybe I sat in the back of the class. I don't understand that. Okay.
None of us do, by the way.
Okay, so I'm not alone.
The processes that they use to arrest Johns, they have to use a decoy officer.
Oh.
And so that takes a specialized individual to do that.
And it's also on track. If you are a law enforcement agency and you have set up this thing and you get the guy, he didn't complete the act. So you can charge him with some other frou-frou stuff. And one of the things that I've heard through some police departments is if I lock up every guy who's soliciting for sex or every guy who answered an ad, where would I put them?
Yes.
How many, if you think about that, where would you put them? Now, I think that we could be ticketing them or the legislature's going to find a whole other way to figure out what we're going to do with them. But the problem is, how many men, and are you and you going to leave here and have conversations with your friends to find out how many of them think it's okay? Because men buy, but it's not the pedophile in the park. It's not the creepy guy who's walking around here looking for the prepubescent child. This is the guy who's sitting next to you.
Yes.
This is the guy who is writing, your checks. This is the guy who is driving a school bus. This is the guy in the church. These are people who are hidden and they have a dirty little
No, but that's just my very point. I mean, the GBI, I wrote a story this morning. The GBI busted 22 people, and one of them was a soldier, one of them was an actor, one of them very respectable people. So I guess there has to be a push for the media to start publishing the faces of the people who get arrested and convicted. That would be a great deterrent.
No, that has happened before, and once we wanted to send people there, they said, and it was the Douglasville police, when this guy, a big profile, Peter Privateer, you can Google him. We wanted to come down and we wanted to pack out that hotel, and survivor who said to me, does that child have to pay for the mistakes of his father? Does that child have to drive past that thing? And when they drive past that thing, their teachers and their friends can laugh at them and say, look at your dad.
They have so many apologists.
So we need a solution. I don't
So
know
they have
what it is,
apologists
but we
after
need-
apologists.
People have to
Hold on.
and it's clear that we live in a society where men are not held accountable for their actions. They are, it's just incredible. And I think you're right, we have to have the conversation. The men in our world have to start talking to each other and saying, it's not okay to exploit children. It's not okay to exploit women. And you are going to be held accountable for that. It's time, and as women, I think we have the right to demand that. And as our brothers who stand with us, you can also demand it as well.
Representative Sharper, you got a question?
Yeah, one comment in the legislation that we just worked on, Safe Harbor, GBI and law enforcement said they do work harder to do a lot of enforcement. So that's one thing we're going to happen. We know people are not going to stop by, okay? We already know that. But one thing, I've seen some of this work, and I think when he was trying to explain to you guys what he wanted, me seeing this work in the past, I don't think he's just going to look at the tragic story. The other side of this is prevention. That's where part of his story will be, part of prevention, letting people know, okay, these young people that don't understand what they're getting into, like we talked about in the committee, how, you know, this older guy, 25, 26 years old, get involved with 14-year-olds, say, I like you, and doing that, and they kind of like a runaway, and they get involved with them, and they say, you know, they tell a friend, I got this girl over here, you know, you do this, and you tell them, hey, that's fine, he's cool, you can make you a little money, and next thing you know, she don't know what she's gotten herself into at that point. So one big part of the story would be the prevention side. And we got to let the people in social media and just the general public know that, okay, your child, someone's possibly looking at your child, your cheerleader at school, what your girl on the dance club, whatever it is, somebody may be looking at them to be exploited. Okay, so I think once he could put a story together, and the information, just like your story, right? You said that you didn't want to be bothered with it. 10 years later, you talked about it. You still, you know, like, had feelings for your pimpos. At that point, when you were younger, he took you in, he got you things you wanted, he did all this stuff for you. That's an interview that he will like. You know, that's what I feel. He's going to get every area, whatever agencies you work with, whatever stories you've had in the past. And like I said, it doesn't have to be the individual, but it has to be a real life story of what really happened. So if I'm home and I'm looking at television or social media or whatever, I see something comes on, like your story that, okay, I got a 14-year-old daughter. I need to talk to her. So I think it's more of getting the word out, not just what happens once you're in the system and something happens. It's like the prevention side of making parents, men, women, whoever, be more aware that sex trafficking is in your neighborhood. Not just in that neighborhood, it's everywhere. So I think that if he can come up with some type of story, anybody can come up with a story, to put it out there, and once you put it out there on the prevention side, and you say, well, I don't want this particular tragic thing to happen to my daughter, so I'm going to step up as a man in support and say, okay, talk to my daughters, also talk to my young sons, to be on the lookout for this kind of stuff. And if I got guys that I hear conversations about, man, I know this little girl, I got to step and say, look, man, that's something that you don't need to do. You know what I mean? But it needs to be out there more in documentaries, stories, social media, small documents. I don't care if it's a 5-minute hit to say sex trafficking in America, sex trafficking in Georgia, and then you hit what can happen to these people, and you backtrack it on this is how it started. They wasn't aware of what was going on, because you got 16, 17-year-old boys who's also trafficking 13 and 14-year-old girls in school. But guess what? Most people in the United States don't know that. So therefore, if you have information, tell about some stories, put it out there, then everybody will be more aware. So therefore, the more aware people are, the more they can engage in what you're doing and be on the prevention side and really get more support around sex trafficking, because we need it. I didn't know a lot about it. You know, I seen the stings of, you know, predators on television, So I started looking at, okay, we watch out for what's going on. I see things in my neighborhood, a house that's got a lot of traffic. Let's see what's going on in that house. But like I say, if we could just get involved and put the information out there, I didn't know much about sex trafficking stuff until we was on the committee, you know, talking about it. But now I'm aware because I was on the committee. But guess what? Everybody else in the United States is not on the committee. They don't understand how close it is. So I think we just need to continue to work together, but we're moving in the right direction. And the more media we can get out there, the more
I think
documents
that
we
feels
can get out
very
there.
important is I can't help but when you say that, I think of the Just Say No campaign of the 80s. We have to be very strategic because there's lots of documentaries out there and there's lots of news stories and there's all these droplets all over the place about it, but there's no strategic campaign that's national as the Just Say No campaign was that brought awareness to the issues that were going on in the 80s. That has to happen with sex trafficking to it's that collective effort and hitting every media spot as you stated. But how do we make that happen from a strategic national standpoint? And who's going to pay for it?
The thing about it now, you know, that we have strong, both like have strong policy in Georgia, for one. The other thing is exactly what he is saying about those tragic stories. Once they grip in, I would give us 30 seconds of the first part of something, and it grabs your attention. That's when you can begin a campaign, but you know for a fact that, okay, let's shock them and say this is what can happen, and as you ease in that story, it tells you where it started, and then it gradually builds, and you'll see how quick anybody can get involved. I don't care if these guys is trafficking. You know what I mean? So therefore, I just think the campaign starts with showing the bad, but including the good and the prevention side of what we're doing in the services. See, I mean, 5 minutes is a long time in film, okay? You hit them hard, show the prevention, and at the end or somewhere show, if this is you, if you were involved in this, here's the information for the hotlines, and then we have our system already in place to take the people in and support them all at the same time. So
Which
that's
is why I
just
think
the
it
way
would
I
have been a great, thank you, Representative Sherman. Which is why I think it would have been a great idea. And I hate to say it this way, but for the young man who, you know, everybody was trying to protect, and like you said, make him the victim now. You know, he has a family and he has children, it has to start somewhere. Okay, say this is somebody that you see every day that you would have no idea this person was doing this. But it starts with putting somebody out there as an example, and it has to keep, you know, happening in order for people to understand that this is not okay. We had a question over here.
Yes, I wanted to, as a survivor, also, I wanted to piggyback off of what you said, Katrina, to say that, yes, I do believe that there should be, there's a lot of stories out there, like she said. We all have a story, and sometimes to look at something being as more, you know, because somebody died, there's a lot of living, walking survivors that still walking mentally, that are not here, that have gone through so many tragedies and so many things that they're not here to be able to be free enough to share their stories, to share their experiences. So I think those things need to take consideration when we're looking at telling these stories, because we don't want to get lost in the gaps in some of that, because some of us are still stuck in a place where we're not able to, and we are dead. Some of them are walking dead. And so we need to find some new creative ways to be able to get those things out so we can be effective and be able to hit more than one area in this whole vicious war. Another thing I wanted to share, the U.S. Department of Human Health and Human Services is doing a great job in D.C., and I think those are some things that we should adopt here. They're starting, I'm a part of the National Speaking Bureau for them, and what they're doing is going around, and they're not just coming up with ideas just to be doing campaigns and, you know, summits and all of this. What they're doing is adding survivors. So I think if the legislators could look at some ideas of being able to bring some survivors in to be a part of their team and give us a platform to be able to come where we could be able to share our stories in a healthy environment so that we can really get some things done. Because there are people like ourselves that want to be a part, that want to get involved, but the platforms are not there, so we are all out trying to make a difference. But if we can come together and use our voices on one accord to get some things done, then he won't have to ask, to give him a story, because we're a living witness of that. We don't have to stay where we were. I am a survivor of exploitation from being in the strip club industry, recruited from one of the #1 strip clubs in Atlanta, and not by some pimp and, driving around thinking we have these ideas of these stereotypes, but it was a female that recruited me into the strip club. So we need to really open up and really come together, bring our voices together, and use the survivors that do want to speak, that are not ashamed, that have gotten to a place that we want to allow our voices to be heard, so that, stories like what he wants to write, we can give and share some real stories that we did have some tragedies, and had it not been, for God, for me, I definitely would not be here and have a voice to share today.
But her skull was fractured in 3 places. She was brutally raped by the pimp, burned all over her body. So when the detective called and we went down, she jumped out of the truck to get away from him because he was going to kill her. So when we went down, her wounds were being hydrated, so they didn't let us see her. But the screams of pain that this young lady was enduring at the age of 25, I had to refrain from crying at that point. But to find out later, the social worker at the hospital, she said, well, we have her father's number at the bottom of her phone. And I said, well, ma'am, that's her pimp. That's what they call them, pimps. And I said, it really wouldn't be in your best interest to call. Well, she called anyway. He didn't show up, but he sent what they call the bottom B. She came. And today, she checked her out. You understand what I'm saying? So she never was able to get the help. And that could have been the only help that would have saved her life. So the hospital personnel has to be very aware of the tactics. They have to be very aware of these young ladies coming in wanting the help. And you have organizations like myself, Out of Darkness, and everybody on this panel, but they don't really know how to handle it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, that's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's sister, that's somebody's mother. You understand what I'm saying? And you definitely want to protect them, but they do need to be better trained on how to handle these situations.
That's good. That's good. We will definitely take that. And I have to say that Senate Bill 8 and Senate Resolution 7, the bills that we just passed, actually came from a living testimony. She pretty much was there to give us input and walk us through. Actually, took us on a tour with the Public Service Commissioner of Metro Atlanta and the obvious places and the not so obvious places where this is still happening. So we have had people, come alongside and help us draft legislation so that it can be relevant. Anyone else? Yes.
And and I heard him, and I agree with everything that you said. But also sometimes saving our children, sometimes mean not letting them go next door to Lil Johnny's house because the brother is in pornography and he wants to play it out on your child. And I say that because as a child, between 7 and 8, I was taught by the babysitter's son. Yeah. So you can't tell me. You understand? Absolutely. So you have to be mindful as a parent when you send your child next door. Because pornography or human sex trafficking or the pimp can be their granddad. It can be their uncle, it can be their brother, it can be their cousin. So while we think that the pimps have big hats and shiny suits and drive Cadillacs, that's not them. They're white tees, baggy pants. You understand what I'm saying? So we have to be very mindful. But anybody that, like she said, everybody has a story. So it's all about what motivates you to protect somebody else's child, or even protect your own.
Anybody else?
How many legislators are in the room right now? Only just a couple of you left. Okay, that means you carry that much more weight for what I would say.
We're used to it.
My mission, I'm making it my mission today for the next 10 years, in 10 years is to see, hopefully at the federal level, but if not there, at least here in Georgia, see the Nordic model of addressing prostitution become our law. And what that does is it decriminalizes the selling of sex and it criminalizes the purchase and the procuring and the pimping of sex. And so in Sweden, in over 20 years, they were laughed almost out of Europe when they adopted this law because everybody else was legalizing prostitution. Now we get to see the fruits of those movements. And in Sweden, they haven't had a woman in prostitution murdered in over 20 years. And in Amsterdam, it's the trafficking, one of the trafficking capitals of the world where they legalize prostitution. So I think if we can move in, and this is just one piece of many policies, but if we can move towards saying, because it changes the whole mindset of the society and the community when we decriminalize the selling and say, these are people in need of services, and that those who are buying all of our law enforcement resources, all of our prosecuting resources are being pointed at the men. And when you decriminalize the easy target, which is the women, then you can put all those resources toward the men. And so this has been done and it's been proven effective. So I want to encourage y'all to start thinking about that because you're going to be hearing a lot more about that.
In what he said earlier, what needs to happen for us to be able to do that is we need to, he said mindset, we need to start looking at commercial sexual exploitation